So you join me on the banks of Farnham Flint on the Reading and District Lake. Firstly, I'd like to thank Dell for allowing us to film on here this morning. I'm now in the early part of my second season on this particular lake, 4th year on the complex, but my second season on Farnham Flint. So I was really fortunate enough a couple of weeks ago to catch one of the special A-team carp from here, the Flint Common. There's 4 carp in here that are renowned to be the big 4. You've got the Farnham Flint Common, which is the oldest of the 4 A-team fish, and I was really fortunate to catch that. But I genuinely believe what I've learned and what I've applied during my time on this lake led to that capture. So I want to talk you through the journey that I've been on over the last 14 months, the tactics that I've used, how I've adapted my approach, particularly using the Evolve range, which has literally transformed my angling since March. My first year was all about learning, exploring, getting to find my feet on the venue, tucking myself in against some really high caliber anglers. And then this year, from March, is really about finesse, refining everything that I've learned in my first season, and I've been able to adapt that and apply that really quickly. I've had some tremendous hits of fish. I've actually had 3 sessions where I had 5 in a session, then I had 7 in a session, and the session where I had the Flint Common, I actually had 10 bites and landed 9 fish. Unfortunately, I lost 1 to a marginal snag, which couldn't be helped, but to get 9 bites in one session, personally, I'm really proud of. So I'm going to talk you through what I've learned, how I've adapted, and ultimately how I've put those fish on the bank. I've always counted myself really lucky with where I live. So I live in Newbury, which is on the M4 corridor, just outside of Reading. So what's really nice for me, now I'm back fishing at Reading and District angling, which is where I used to fish a number of years ago, but I've been back on here more recently, is because I live in close proximity, I'm able to easily come in, even just for a couple of hours, have a walk round, see what's going on. I don't get in people's faces, I don't try and interrogate information out of people. I use my eyes, I use my feet, and I can glean quite a lot just by walking around the lake. I go fishing every other weekend, that's my aim. So I tend to come either late on Fridays and I'm away early on a Sunday, but what I try and do is I try and come in between my sessions so I can come and see what's going on, where people are fishing, where the bait's being applied. I'm looking at the bird life to see if the birds are responding to baited areas. I want to feel like when I rock up into the car park, I've got a fair idea around what's been going on. I can't come every 2 weeks without any information or insights at all. I find that puts me on a massive back foot, and I almost feel like I'm approaching a new lake every time I come, and that's something that I work to try and avoid happening. I work full time. I've got a girlfriend and 2 fantastic children. I'm also a grassroots football coach, so I'm very busy in life, but that 1-2 hour walk around in between sessions I personally find really invaluable. Even as simple things like I pull up in a car park and I can take account of how many vehicles are in the car park, that will give me an instant idea of how busy or how free particular ends of the lake are. So it's all information that I gather, I collect, and ultimately I apply to my angling. It definitely helps me stay on the front foot and ultimately put fish on the bank. So having built up all of that knowledge before arrival, the way I've finessed 2 particular areas of my fishing is bait and bait application, but also rig and rig presentation. So starting with my bait. So last year I was really unfortunate to catch 36 tench within my first season. Now that was through application of small particles and smaller offerings of bait. This year I've honed it all back just to pure fishing with boilies. But what I've done is I've fished variable sizes of boilies. So I've put 12s, 16s and 20s together almost as 3/3. I've been really lucky, I haven't caught 1 tench so far this season, so there's definitely something in that. In terms of my rig and rig presentation, I always try and keep the hook bait as close to the lake bed as possible. So if I'm fishing over weed like siltweed, I'll predominantly probably fish a hinge with a pop-up, so my pop-up is visible above that siltweed. More importantly, and as often as I can, I'm looking for clear areas in silt, surrounded by siltweed and heavier sort of areas of Canadian weed, because I want to get my hook bait as close to the lake bed as possible. That's the goal that I try and achieve on most venues I fish, and it's definitely become a really popular choice for me on this particular venue. Is I'm fishing wafters that are slightly overweighted, and I've been using a really short 4-inch multi-rig, incorporating the new Evolve weight clip and the new weights. Now the reason for that is that presentation can get me almost completely flush to the lake bed. But that wafter is sitting just above the lake bed, surrounded by similar sized free offerings, and I'm really confident that when a fish ultimately swims across my spot, it's that bait that they're probably seeing first. The QC weight clip and the way it clips onto the actual weight itself, really important. If I put my finger on the hook point and just lift it approximately about an inch off the lake bed, I can feel that hook point going into my finger. It's led to some incredible hook holds. Almost all of my fish, it's been the identical hook hold. Centre of the lip, about 10 mil back, and in most occasions I'm having to use forceps just to prise the bend of the hook from the fish's mouth. But it's been an incredible setup for me. It's led to some consistent captures, and right now my confidence is rocking, and to be honest, I can't wait to apply everything I've been learning this year through the winter, because I'm going to deviate to another water in the winter which is more heavily stocked than Farnham Flint, and I'm really excited to be applying what I've learned this year on that venue in the winter. So my first year on here was all about exploring the water, getting familiar with my surroundings, peg names, distances, the contours, the variable areas of depth. You know, it's a 25-acre lake cut up heavily by large bays, islands at short range, islands at long range. So my first year was all about getting all that done, getting comfortable with my surroundings. I came back on here in March after a really successful winter on another water. I came back on here in March with all that built up knowledge. What I did know on here is there was 3 or 4 swims that I really wanted to concentrate on. Mainly because it had good history of catching some of the bigger fish in this lake. That was probably the main reason, but I started in one of those 4 swims back in March and I was really successful. The weather was still really cold, the water temperatures were really cold, but using the new Evolve helicopter setup, I was able to dispatch some hinges at 25, 26 wraps with relative ease, and I did catch myself a really special mid-30 fish that hadn't seen the bank that often relatively quickly. So that was a really nice start, and it got me off on a really confident foot. I talked earlier about wanting my baits closer to the lake bed. Well, the other swims that I've concentrated on, I was able to do that. Really silty areas, really clear areas amongst what is an abundance of Canadian weed in this lake. This lake didn't suffer too heavily in the spring with abundances amounts of Canadian weed. The lake clarity remained quite murky through the spring, and that enabled me to find more clear areas in the swims that I wanted to concentrate on. And this is where I really flipped to the multi-rig, and I'll be honest, I haven't looked back. I've fished hinges a couple of times in a couple of swims in a couple of certain situations, but I've focused predominantly on that multi-rig. My confidence is so high that once I've got in one of those swims and got my rods out on those spots and I've got those multi-rigs exactly where I want them, I genuinely believe, particularly this season, it's just a case then of the fish turning up. I know if the fish turn up and one mouths across the top of my wafter, I've literally got a fish in the net. And that's been proven with the multiple hits I've had of fish. I've been quite staggered, to be honest, at how much my angling has taken a turn for the better this year. It's interesting because if I think about my angling, I've not been a huge weight clip user historically. I predominantly used the helicopter setup, but the weight clip has completely transformed my angling, and I'm probably bouncing around now on the banks of this lake and hopefully future venues with a huge level of confidence, and I genuinely will put that down to the way I've applied the rig components and the bait application. Statistically, I knew I was edging myself closer to some of the bigger fish in the lake. So this lake doesn't have a huge amount of stock, but there is I think now more fish in this lake than people have historically thought there were, and it's all about putting those odds in your favour. So I felt a lot more confident in the swims I was in, hugely confident with my bait application and the rigs, and then I was starting to then getting multiple hits of fish, and inevitably that's going to lead to some of the better fish that are in the lake. And with the multiple hits of fish I was having, I started to more regularly catch more of the 30-pound carp. So I knew I was onto something, and I knew it was a matter of time until I nailed something that was going to be truly special. And I just felt something different in the air. So I was texting James and Rich at Evolve. I texted my nephew, who's a big carp angler. The whole ambience of the lake the night before the capture of the Flint Common, things felt really different. The moon phase wasn't that favourable, so minimal moonlight, but it was really bright. There was also a real strange atmosphere amongst all the bird life on the lake. The birds were really active. There was minimal wind. It was fairly calm and fairly still, but the birds were really agitated for some reason. I'd heard some good fish the night before, but not in front of me. But I know that those big fish do get into the lake, into the swim that I was in. But the bird life it felt like really restless. All of a sudden it would go really calm and quiet, and next minute the fish were clearly agitating the birds, and I just felt something special was on the cards. I sent a couple of text messages actually at 10:30, 11 o'clock the night before, saying something big was on the cards. Keep your phone at hand, because I'll want some hands for some photographs hopefully in the morning. And yeah, and then it happened. So Farnham Flint is notorious for early morning bites, and as I said, it was my 8th bite of 9 fish. The alarm signalled like no different to any other take that I'd had during that particular session. The fight was quite deep and quite ploddy, but what is quite common on here as well, I'm fishing really clear areas, and fishing tight to those weights, so I'm getting indication really quickly. But on this particular bite, it was really heavy and really ploddy, but the fish are picking up the bait and then they're ploughing into the nearest batch of Canadian, and that happened on this particular bite. The fish are putting their heads in, it's covering their eyes, and then the fight is actually quite deep and ploddy. But this particular fish went over the net cord, and I'm in the water, and I knew instantly I'd finally bagged one of the 4 that I've been targeting, and what a fish. I'd seen lots of photographs of it. I'd never seen it on the bank before, but what a common carp. I'd spoken to the club just to find out a little bit of history about this particular fish. So I know in the early 2000s this fish was upper 20s, and it was the king of the pond. So I'm told that this fish is probably 40 or 45 years old. And as I said, it's got huge pedigree in the area. But what a truly special common carp. A couple of the people that I texted the night before were actually already on the venue, so they came over to do a bit of fishing, and I think I'd made them restless the night before. So yeah, fair play to the guys. And then it was a case of on the mat, get some really nice photographs, and away she went. And I'm a big believer in my style of fishing will eventually get me to those bigger prizes in the lake. My general approach when I approach any new water is I don't want to know too much about the lake. I don't want to be spoon-fed. I want to work it out for myself. I'm always confident in year 2 and year 3, that's when things will start to unlock for me. So to happen so early in the start of my second season, I'm really excited as to what's to come, because I'm gonna persist on here. There are 3 other really big special prizes in here, and to be honest with you, the way my rig approach and my bait approach has all come good for me. I can't wait to keep going, and I'm sure it's a matter of time before I unlock something else that I'm going to be incredibly proud of.